So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining our webinar, the second in our series on profitable pricing. My name is Esther Carder and I'll be chairing, well, quite lightly chairing today's session. Most of you probably know us already, but for those of you who don't, we're leading accountants in the media and marketing services industry. We work with clients right across marketing services, film, TV, theatre, and creative and media technologies. Clients really range right from sort of startups through to PE-backed and multinational groups. We're part of Wilkins & Smith, which is a top 15 firm of accountants and advisors. And we're also part of an international network called More Global, with presence in over 100 countries, which makes us very well positioned to help our clients with international expansion. So as I said in our last webinar, pressure on pricing from clients is not exactly a new topic. Clients have been pretty much demanding more for less for quite a few years now. And in the annual survey that we do every year, where we look at the KPIs of some sort of 250 marketing services companies, the average profit margins have been sort of generally speaking on the decline for the last 5 years. We did another survey earlier this year where we asked agency owners and FDs what the kind of more pressing issues within their agencies were, and a great concern to many was pricing pressure from clients. But a worry though really was that quite a lot of those agencies weren't planning on putting their rates up within the next 6 months, and even those that were planning on putting their rates up were expecting quite a lot of pushback. But conversely, most agencies were expecting to have to give their staff a pay rise. So this sort of pulling apart of what you're paying people versus what you're getting paid, obviously putting pressure on agencies and threatening to squeeze their margins even further. So we thought it would be interesting to run a mini series of webinars loosely around the theme of profitable pricing, and to hear from industry advisors and agencies who are looking to do things a bit differently to ensure that they really get paid fairly and profitably for the work that they do. The first was a webinar with Tracy Shirtcliffe from the Virtue Group and Ian McClellan from Ogilvy, and they were talking about how agencies can move away from selling hours and start selling what they're delivering, and using Tracy's scoping software to facilitate that. And some interesting insights came out of that, and that webinar is available as recorded on our website if you missed that and want to go and have a look. So today's webinar really does very much follow on from that, with a sort of much deeper look really at how we can move away from a service-led model to a product-led model, and I'm told by our guests in just a year. So I'm delighted to introduce our guests this afternoon. We have Caroline Johnson and Tess Wicksteed. So Caroline is an experienced strategic consultant with more than 20 years experience developing sustainable business models for the marketing services industry. She's also co-founder of the business model company, which is passionate about creating future fit agencies by developing and delivering sustainable business changing models. And Caroline will be discussing how to design those new models and apply them to different areas of the business. Tess Wicksteed, she's a partner at Here Design, a collaborative studio of 40 thinkers, writers, designers and makers who partner with their clients to develop projects from initial ideas right through to the ultimate experience. Tess has lived and worked in both New York and London, and has been lead strategist on big brands and small across many different categories, including Coca-Cola, Green and Black, Starbucks, Disney, Target, Moët and the Hoxton. And Tess will be sharing her thoughts with us, having worked with Caroline on turning productization theory into a real workable practice. So Caroline and Tess, if you want to pop your cameras on. Super. So I'm going to be asking Caroline and Tess a few questions. So Caroline's going to go first. There will be time for questions at the end, but please do, if you've got questions, pop your questions in the Q&A function, not the chat function. They're much easier to manage in the Q&A function. So please do pop questions as they come to you throughout in there, and I will try and weave those in to the session and put them to Caroline and Tess. So Caroline, I guess really a sort of a bit of a, because I mean, I guess a lot of people won't particularly be familiar with what you do at the business model company. So I guess it would be really good just to sort of get an overview about how the business model company works with clients in the marcoms industry to deliver these sort of new innovative pricing models.
Hi, Esther. Thank you. And hello to everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting Tess and I. Just very quickly, as a way of introduction to what we're doing in the industry, we run business model change programs. We run business model change programs that last about a year and typically take a business from a predominantly service-led model to a complete shift in that business model, which can be a fully productized business model, it can be a technology model, it can be a consulting model, and sometimes it's a blend of 3 different business models that are the right sort of business model ingredients to support that capability and the opportunity to scale. We work across all marketing services, across all markets, and we also create new enterprise level marketing models, marketing operational models for large global advertisers and brands. The sort of businesses we partner with when we're running our programs are businesses that have a sort of innate belief and confidence that they deliver what we call commercially transformative creative solutions to their, not just their clients' brands, but also their clients' businesses. So they have an innate sense of confidence and belief in their relevance, their progressiveness to the current and future marketplace, and to their value. But they also believe that they're being inhibited and held back by the wrong business model. So when we talk about going from service to product in a year, we're not just talking about replacing some of those services with a few products. We're talking about something that is much more intrinsic to that, which is a complete system and behavioral and business model change in a year, which is sort of a bit like going on a year of business model boot camp. So it's not necessarily for everyone, but it is a complete sustainable shift from one way of being to another. And when you make that change, completely new rules of the game apply to you. So a lot of the challenges that our industry is currently facing when you've changed your business model and you are truly authentic internally and externally, a lot of those challenges actually do disappear and go away.
So this sounds like quite a big, I mean, you've used the word transformational, it sounds like quite a big promise of something that can happen. And presumably some agencies are sort of more suited to this than others. I mean, what would be sort of the ideal conditions for success?
You're absolutely right. It's not for everyone. The businesses that we work with that do really well have really, really strong leadership. They have leadership that can go on a long-term journey and prioritize that journey at every point. They have a certain amount of rigor and belief and confidence in what they do and their relevance to that future marketplace. They also have real ambition and scale in their sights. So when we start off the journey, we completely redesign their business model, but also most importantly, the commercial KPIs that they are going to be measuring. So a product or consultancy or tech business model performs at a significant higher rate across all KPIs than a service-led model. So having the ambition to make a significant change and shift is really, really important, rather than looking at maybe a slower journey where you're optimizing and recovering more value, but predominantly keeping the same system, but being able to extract more value from that current system or protect your value a little bit more. So it's absolutely not for everyone. And it really depends on the conditions of the market, the conditions of the business, and what the long-term ambitions are.
I mean, it definitely sounds like there's quite a lot of commitment involved in this, and probably quite a lot of hard work and a large degree of time investment, I would have thought. So what would you need to prepare agencies for in that respect? And I guess maybe what are some of the challenges that they might experience along the way as well?
The preparation for this is to absolutely nail together what they want to get out of this and why they want to go on this journey, what their expectations are. Our job is, rather than seeing this as a commercial sort of financial or business re-engineering process, our job is to make this a creative process and to inspire them and motivate them as we go through it. If the program we're running together is the best thing that happens in their week, and the thing that they enjoy the most, and the thing that they feel is teaching them and giving them a whole new language almost to be able to talk, if we can achieve that, then they will trust the process and go on the journey and come out the other side. The hard stuff, which is how do you create the systems, how do you create the pricing models, the new commercial models, how do you create a whole new language around clients and almost sort of re-pivot the business around client challenges. That, as much as possible, we have built the tools, the IP, the systems, the platforms, the tech, the product playbooks, the productization models, the program models, all of that has been pre-built by us. So we can transfer that. But the most important starting point is you've got to have a compelling reason to want to do this. And we always say, go big. Don't do this and want to make sort of small little proof points along the way. If you're going to do this, go full in and go big from day one. The commercial models are set up right at the beginning, so we don't leave the important things like the sort of improvement in revenue per head and net margin to chance. They are built in, and everything that we then create delivers to that. So a consulting business model or a product business model will perform between 150 and 250 revenue per head, and it will typically perform between 35-40% net margin up to 65. So we start the journey with that expectation that that is what we are going to be delivering, and we don't compromise along the way. So as long as you trust the process and your levels of belief and confidence in your creativity and your capability, as long as you have that at the beginning with a strong leadership team, you will get through it, because the process is designed to get you through it.
I mean, I'm massively oversimplifying this, I know, but I'm just sort of trying to draw an analogy between, I guess, what you're talking about and what Tracy was talking about in our previous webinar, which is about it's sort of we're selling things rather than selling time and materials. And I know one of the questions, we had a lot of questions coming in around how do procurement view this? Do procurement accept that you're going to sell them a thing? And then how do you demonstrate the value of that thing? Because isn't that more difficult for them to understand than the old-fashioned, it's going to take this person this long at this day rate?
It's I think the thing to stress there is if you take a service that clients have been used to having on what we call the all-you-can-eat buffet with no portion control. So you've got an item on the all-you-can-eat buffet, and that item is taken off the all-you-can-eat buffet and it is assigned as an output with a different price attached to it. Clients can still benchmark that because it's recognizable as the item on the all-you-can-eat buffet. So of course they're going to push back. But I think this is where you take the natural capability of a creative business and work hard to completely repackage that thing or that service into a repackaged product, which is packaged on the value that it delivers, the output and outcome in the hands of the client, not the process that it takes to create it in the business or the agency. That creative repackaging is essential to being perceived externally as an authentic product-led business or a consulting-led business. If you don't do the complete repackaging and make your products differentiated and extremely valuable to clients, if they are still able to benchmark them as services, you will deliver less commercial success or less success, because you've just changed the pricing. You haven't actually repackaged through the lens of value. So that's really important. The second thing I think that's really important, particularly for procurement, is if you are going to move to a productized business model, that requires a whole system change, from the way you organize yourself around your client challenges to adding new, what we call front doors to the business, changing the client engagement model, moving from selling services to capability frameworks, a modular product playbook, being able to sell long-term programs to clients, new commercial models, new commercial swagger, as we call it, flexible pricing models, and then also looking at how you scope and resource and price, and how that is automated, and also standardized delivery to be able to secure also a higher margin through efficiency. So if procurement see you as an authentic product-based business or consulting-based business, then different rules of the game apply to those business models. They don't then ask you for resource plans or timesheets, or if they try and ask you for resource plans and timesheets, the fact that they view you as authentic in a different business model means that you get an awful lot less pushback.
So you mentioned sort of uniqueness, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the need to sort of the product not to be able to be sort of easily benchmarked against others. So does this, because if that sort of feels to me like it lends itself more therefore to a specialist agency rather than a generalist agency, or can anyone apply this methodology?
It doesn't really make any difference what your capability is or where you sit in the industry. We've fully productized many what we call pure play creative businesses. And as we have data businesses, media businesses, communications, design, it really doesn't matter what sector you're starting from. There are really, really smart ways of being able to package up creative businesses and move them to products and programs. And as a result of that, being able to make them more creative and more innovative. I think one of the wrong assumptions in the industry is that if you are a pure play craft-based creative business that likes to sort of bespoke everything from scratch, then moving to more of a product-based business model actually detracts or compromises your creativity. The exact opposite happens. It actually allows you to thrive and move more upstream into more extended value areas, your creativity and your innovation, because it gives you more time to think and more time to apply actually your creativity and your innovation, because you're running a much more efficient standardized delivery methodology. But also when you are working to a much improved or enhanced commercial performance, the way you engage and interact with clients, the way you think about hiring talent, investing in new capability areas, that is is liberated, because you're making all those decisions from the right business model, from a profitable, scalable business model, not a compromised one. So it really does change it really does enhance the nature of creative businesses.
Before I ask the next question, I'm just going to remind everyone, please do put your own questions into the Q&A if you've got anything particular that you'd like me to ask Caroline or Tess. So I guess sort of misconceptions generally, so the fact that procurement might not accept it could be a misconception. You know, my own misconception around, does this lend itself better to specialist agencies? Is there anything else that sort of people might misconceive about where this may work or not?
All of the businesses we work with will start thinking that the misconception is that the devil is outside. The devil is either, you know, all the challenges are procurement. You know, procurement won't let us, or procurement won't accept it, or we can do this in new business, but we can't do this with existing clients. None of those assumptions are correct if you make the change properly in a sustainable way. The challenges are internal. The devil is actually inside in your own organization. It's about all of the things that, you know, Tim Williams will talk about and Tracy talked so eloquently about on the last week's webinar. It's your own commerciality. It's your ability to learn a new language, to move to a new system, your ability to be prepared to protect your value and say no to clients. It's all of the behavioral change aspects where you are going from one system to another, because what we call the goodwill service model, most of us have sort of grown up in, that will try and sort of cannibalize in many ways the attempts to move to a new, better system. So I think one of the things all of our clients will say and have in common is actually the hardest thing is the internal challenge. The reality of the external challenges is not so, when it comes to it, those are less visible, or less prevalent is probably a better word. But you're going to hear from Tess in a minute. So these are all brilliant questions. It's much better that Tess actually answers these, because I'm talking obviously from theory. And it's I think, you know, actually talking to people who've been on the journey and come out the other side is you know, there's an awful lot there are a lot of insights from that, particularly for, you know, for a creative business, because again, people assume that if it's data analytics and technology, it's so much easier and obvious to move to a product model, but that's also a wrong assumption.
Yeah. And I think you're doing this cross-border, if I'm right. So I mean, on the basis that, you know, the Americans always think they're a couple of years ahead of us. Are they a couple of years ahead of us on this, or just as far behind as we are in the UK?
The challenges and the problems are the same. You'll probably expect to hear. They have, I suppose, their challenge that they have often more scale. So it's they're taking on still a year's business model change program, but you've got to accommodate the fact that they're often much bigger when you start. I think, you know, our audience is slightly different in the US. Predominantly in the US, we are hired by the PE companies, by the investment companies, by the acquirers across, you know, almost all or most of their acquisitions, and are therefore, in changing the rules of the game and business model, we are also transforming the multiples that will be applied to that business if there's a transaction or an exit, because consulting, tech and product multiples are significantly higher than service-led multiples. So there's a different starting point in the US. In the UK, we're predominantly hired by shareholders and founders.
Mm. So for anyone in the audience that is sort of thinking this, you know, this sounds like a journey they might want to embark on, what would your advice be? What would your top tips be?
Listen to Tess. You've probably heard enough from me, but I think it'll be really interesting. The businesses we work with have been phenomenally successful, and they are incredibly generous with their time. Whenever we're working with new clients, we always ask them to spend at least an hour with 3 recent clients that have gone on this journey and have come out the other side, having achieved all the success. So I think actually spending time asking questions and gaining the insights from the businesses that have actually transformed, and we've got access to all of those businesses, and they are always very generous with their time if there are new companies that want to come on that journey.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you very much, Caroline. So I think that is that's time to go over to you, Tess, to find out the how this all works in practice. So I mean, also I know you've been through this whole process, Tess, over the last sort of couple of years, and I've no doubt it did take a lot of hard work and did take up, you know, a degree of the senior management time. But what role has sort of Caroline and her team played in the success of having gone through this process to transform the way your business sort of charges for its services?
So we're going to bring you in later, Esther, to say whether it worked or not, because you're our accountant, so you're the main. Well, I can just give a sort of short narrative of how we started working with Caroline. So we were ranging around for some help because we were a sort of 30 people, quite successful multi-service design company. And we were really wanting to make sure that our growth was responsible, sustainable. And also, I've got a bit of a loathing of companies over sort of 50. It just becomes such hard work as the manager. Everything that you came into the job for goes away because it's suddenly just sheer management. So we were very, very determined to make sure that we grew in value, not volume. We recognized that volume would grow probably too, and more people, but we wanted it to be about value. So we were casting around and we were talking to quite a lot of different people about thinking about how to grow. And really that was what we were doing. We were quite a hard sell for Caroline because it sounded great, but it also sounded like complete fluff. We were like, yeah, all right, you know, you've clearly got the commercial swagger that you referred to earlier, but you know, would this really work? And Caroline's fees were sort of pretty astronomical for a relatively small company. And we were like, oh, do we really want to do this? So anyway, we flirted with Caroline for quite a long time. Like, can you prove it? Can you give us testimonies? Can you help us understand what we're going to deliver? And in the end, it was just ultimately a leap of faith. We were like, okay, listen, let's give this a go. Let's see how it works and let's commit some time to it and let's do it. And it has been transformational for our company. It's been transformational in a number of different ways. Caroline talked about the enemy within. A lot of people in the creative industries have entered it because they love it. And on one level, in their hearts and souls, they think of themselves as artists. So their perspectives are, even if they're very commercial artists, they're still thinking about what they want to do. And the way they present themselves and everything is more about how, you know, we did this beautiful thing, or talking about craftedness, or all of the different ways we present ourselves. And Caroline was just a complete ball breaker on saying, you've got to start from the client perspective. And I think that week after week after week of her saying it, it has at last sort of the penny has dropped, and we do think like that. And empathy is a very difficult thing. You know, we can all pretend and think that we have it, but actually to really run a business like that is a very, very difficult thing. And that needs to be done also in, and still be doing the things that you want to do, because all of your staff are coming to you because they want to be flourishing creatively. So she transformed our perspective, helped us in this process to really consolidate our point of difference. I think that the commercial swagger that Caroline refers to is a really fundamental thing that she passed on to us. So we did have a new confidence coming out of this process about charging and about, you know, I suppose it's self-worth really, isn't it? But it's just, we actually are good and we should pay and charge for it. And the fees, although I'm being facetious about them, without those fees, we wouldn't have had the sort of focus that we had. It focused our minds. It made sure that we had these sessions with Caroline and Sarah, her sidekick, who's an enormously brilliant person like Caroline. And when we were in there, we made sure we'd done our homework. And then we made sure they counted because they were valuable sessions. And that in itself was a lesson about what Caroline was trying to teach us, which is if you want people to value what you do, charging for it is a pretty clever way of doing it. So that was the sort of main things. And also Caroline is a sort of mix of a sort of military person and a teacher, and we were all quite bonded as naughty children in the class to sort of get a gold star from teachers. So that was very nice when that happened. So it's quite a fun process, it really is, especially if you're a sort of get on reasonably well as a sort of partnership or founders or whoever the team is that's involved. So yeah,
I think that's a really important point, isn't it? Having somebody there to mark your homework and therefore you will do it, because we all know, and your point around agencies growing to the point where you've all stopped doing the thing that you originally loved and you're managing a company rather than doing the craft. And so it's easy to get buried in the client work rather than step back and think about the strategy of the business.
If you have any internal projects, I mean, they take back burner, because if you're a reasonably successful business, you're all busy. So if you have got this thing, you're carving out the time in a serious way and you're going to do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I mean, how difficult was it really? Because obviously, you know, again, we've talked a lot about the theory, but how difficult was it to put that theory into actual practice? How long did that take, for example?
Well, I think psychologically, it took most of the process for me personally to sort of hear what Caroline was saying, because the procurement point is just the most, you know, like, well, if I'm essentially doing the same thing, how am I going to suddenly get them to pay more? I just don't understand. You know, you can have commercial swagger, but what are we talking about? Raising rates, whatever. And I think that, you know, it is a complete transformational thing, which is to say, so Caroline talks about products and we're all talking about productization, but essentially it's a program. It's like saying, this is what you need to start with. This leads to this, that leads to this, leads to this, and thinking about the client journey all the way through, and then what you can do in that course. So I would say that the movement from sort of theory to practice was, okay, let's now take what Caroline's talked to us about. And we worked, well, just so that, you know, it's not like Caroline telling you to do things all the way through. You're working on filling in the formats, changing the formats. You know, my other partners, they're all designers. And so they were all the time restructuring the infographics and the structures and the way that Caroline was thinking about it and challenging the formats. So you're really working as you go through it. But at the end, you've got a whole load of stuff. And then you're like, shit, I've got a whole load of stuff. Am I really going to be able to sell all of this in? So for us, there was a big journey of sort of trial and error, of working out that a pragmatic approach and just biting bite-sized bits of it was not a compromise. It was going to be all right. We could still do it. There were lots of different things in it, which is that you found out that certain products were better for existing clients to new clients. You know, there are lots of different things like that.
And I think you were telling me when we spoke the other day that there was this suite of products that you offered to a client, you know, sort of menu, expecting them to pick number 1, 5, and 7, and they said they wanted them all.
Caroline was very chuffed because it happened about 3/4 of the way through. So we were sort of like, you know, champing at the bit. Once we got the idea, we would constructed and had some beautiful blocks and made it all look very nice. We sort of spent a lot of time talking about the colors we were going to use and that sort of thing. Anyway, we got it and we presented it during a pitch to a client. And they literally, and we started calling the digital app that we created with the proposal a sweet shop, because they were like kids in a sweet shop. She was like, oh yeah, I want that, I want that, I want that, I want that. And we were like, oh, this isn't exactly what we anticipated, which is a hard sell. And yeah, I'll talk about how the form of the products, that's kind of the most important thing, really.
And what about sort of new versus existing clients? This feels like intuitively it would be a much easier sell to new clients, whereas it might be a little bit more difficult to get existing clients to come around to a completely different way of thinking.
Well, I think that then what you do, I mean, the way you sell it in, so if you're selling in the whole program, this is how we work, that's how you do it with a new client. But with an existing client, it's more like products. We've got this amazing new offer that will help this particular problem that you've told us about.
Good question. Oh, sorry. Carry on. So we've got a question coming, although I think actually it's probably one for Caroline, actually. Yeah, somebody's business isn't in the creative industry, it's in the private wealth industry. And so they were just wondering, I guess, is it just as applicable to this? And is there, do you or anyone else particularly advise in sort of the private wealth industry, trying to move them from from service to product?
We work in the advisory industry, so the most important thing is not so much what sector you're in, but the fact that you want to change your business model. And if it is a service to a product or service to more of a consulting model, then yes, that would be within our sweet spot.
Another question's come in. I think this might be more for you, Tess, from what you were saying. Could you give some examples of the sorts of things that would change?
That would change what? Our practice, the way that we do it, or what?
Tell you what, I'll let that person just give a little bit more meat on their question while I ask you the next one. Because yeah, that's a good point. So in terms of broader learnings, I mean, there must have been so much that came out of going through this process. So tell us a bit about sort of the other broader learnings that you got out of this.
Well, I suppose there's a number of them, and I can just sort of whip through them. There were certain things that were relevant to us, but not to Caroline. So as we were going through it, when you create a product, as you say, the reason that we do this job, a lot of us in the creative industry, is because we love to think about problems and to bring really creative, customized solutions to particular problems or challenges. And the idea of creating a sort of formulaic product that we would definitely make money from, that would be original, but that wouldn't really engage us creatively, was like a sort of death to us. So we, realized that when we were creating the products, we had to create an infrastructure that meant that you could repeat things and be much more efficient in terms of proposals, in terms of process, in terms of all of that sort of thing. But we need to build in creative freedom into the productization process. So I used to work at a previous agency, and we had a sort of approach about brands, and it meant that whatever I had to say about brands, I had to always say something about that exact thing, like always talking about this type of brand. And eventually it killed you because you weren't thinking freshly about it. So what we tried to do with all of our products, and we have done, is build in total creative free fall and excitement and stimulus at the heart of the products. So then the other thing we learned, which was that you don't need to do everything at once. Prioritize, focus on one or two truly compelling products and learn from that process. So you will get to the total transformation that Caroline talked about, but just don't try and do it all at once, because we were really nearly killing ourselves on productizing everything, and it just didn't work. Originality at all costs. We're making these sound like, I mean, it's not that different from any other products. If your product isn't genuinely different and interesting, then people won't buy it. So originality at all costs. A product's only truly valuable if it is unique. And the productization process isn't really about spin or repackaging. So if you're production or, I don't know, just creative concepts or something, that's not the point. It's not about that. You have to have something genuinely different in it. Some things and some bits of the process are easier to productize than others. So don't stress it. Don't bother. If you just want to have something that is part of your suite of things that isn't productized, that's okay, we think. And then the most exciting probably discovery as we went through is that, yes, this whole process was transformational for us, but productization itself is an engine of change as well as growth and profit. So if you are, for example, we're very crafty and we're very good, and we see ourselves as inheritors of the arts and craft movement, all of this sort of stuff that we love and that clients sort of glaze over about. But we realized once we're getting into digital, we were like, right, this is our opportunity to have a product that is totally way ahead of our, market behavior. Like, hair design, thinking about digital, we were able to create a product that was just like way ahead of what we might be considered used for, and that means that everything has been able to move towards that product. So and that's what we've done across all the different disciplines, really. We've created a product that is way ahead, and then everything else in the organization sort of come towards that product, which is kind of groovy. We like that.
Somebody said they would love to hear from Tessa about how you presented this new model to your existing clients, and was it only for new products that they hadn't previously bought? And if it wasn't, how did they face into the change with clients that are continuing to buy the same services?
Well, I mean, you know, everything like this is proof in the pudding. So, you know, a lot of these things, when it's new clients, I mean, I don't know how this person does development, but basically it was just a question of saying, we've got this amazing new offer. It corresponds to what the problem you were talking to us about last week. Do you want to do it? So we didn't sell in a wholesale, we're now productized, you know, this is our new model, That is almost one of the things that Caroline taught us. It's not relevant to them. They don't care how you're running your business. They just want to know what it is that's going to make them better. So we didn't ever, I don't think we've shared with anyone, this is the first time I've been talking about it in the outside world. You know, we just said, right, this is subtly changing our practice. And hopefully the things that clients are seeing is that there's some really useful new tools that they can use.
I think there's, sorry, Esther, I think there's some discipline that is really relevant when you're creating these hero products. It's really important that you protect them from the previous model. So what doesn't tend to work in our experience is when you go through the hard work of creating these beautiful products and changing the way you talk about value and the story, and then sometimes they're available on what we call the all-you-can-eat buffet for clients, and other times they're available as products. That merging of the lines and that sort of compromise of allowing yourself to operate on two systems until you build up your confidence or the proof points is a really dodgy compromise. So one of the things we're quite strict about is that when you do create the products, they are only available as products. So they're either in scope or out of scope. They're not in scope for retainer clients on the all-you-can-eat buffet. And so that there's some discipline around how you go forward that does protect you when you're in that sort of middle ground.
So this is about picking products that you do this with, as opposed to picking clients that you do this with. Is it?
Yes, it's about
that.
Yeah,
it's not kind of going, right, well, we'll trial this with client A and B and we'll leave the rest of the clients alone. It's going, right, we'll get a hero product and we'll try that with all our clients and trying to sell it in a
exactly. So when you identify across your capability and talent and your services the areas that are differentiated and valuable and can be productized, those then, when you move them across, they're only available as the products. You can't have, sometimes they're still the services and sometimes they're the products. It just doesn't work. You have to be prepared to not give them to clients as services. So you're not, as Tess said, you're not trying to productize everything. There are certain commoditized areas that are still valuable to you and clients that can stay as commoditized areas. But the job is to really protect and differentiate where the real value is and where you can differentiate to clients and where clients will.
I have to say that our sort of vision for growth is that the commoditized areas will drop off in importance for us as we go on. So that it is kind of an indication, if you can't productize something, then you're not doing anything very unique. So, you know, let's aim to eventually ditch that and let someone else pick up let someone else do that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of clients have invested in talent and capability that they've then attached to an out-of-date comms or campaign model. So their monetization of that talent and investment is through what is quite a traditional comms and campaign model. when they go on the journey and they come out the other side, they can make a choice not to play in that area anymore. So they're not as, some of them don't do campaigns and comms anymore, and others do it on their terms. So they do it to their rules of engagement and their commercial parameters rather than the clients, because they've created what we call these other front doors for the business that are differentiated and separated from more of the sort of legacy, commoditized areas of the industry. So there are, I mean, I think it's as Tess says, which is you've got to know, you've got to identify which bits to separate and to almost break the codependency, because we tend to sometimes rush too quickly through strategy and planning and insights to get to an area in the process that we know we can monetize, because often those first two stages are given away for free, certainly in pitches. So if you break the codependency between strategy and planning and the sort of more strategic consultative area from the more creative development and production area, you can sit in strategy and consulting for longer and start to develop some longer term programs for clients. And you can sit there for longer because now you've learned how to properly monetize smaller projects and smaller pieces of work, rather than chasing the sort of £1 to £3 million clients that everyone is chasing, where there are very few of those every year. So how do you make fantastic margin from smaller projects and smaller strategic pieces of work? Once you know you can do that, it sort of liberates you in how you think about how you engage and how you deliver that, the vehicle you have to deliver that value. So some of the problems are the codependency within your own model that determines your behavior, because the monetization window is so tiny. Everything outside of that monetization window is rushed or given away for free.
Thinking more about profit rather than just thinking about the big revenue wins that you might get that might actually be very low profit or even unprofitable, because like you say, there's not many of them, everyone's going after them, and you get squeezed on price.
Exactly.
And you're not differentiated in what you're doing.
Exactly. So it's moving from what we call the value revenue model, which is a flower pot shape, to what we call a hybrid margin model. And it actually completely changes the way you do your P&L. So the P&L starts with net margin reporting by client, by product, by business area, rather than lumping all sort of revenue together. So the tools you use in the business will change as well, because you'll be prioritizing margin over revenue.
I'm just going to go back to that original question that we had before. So they've come back with a little bit more what they mean. So they're sort of saying, so within a proposal for a retainer, we have a product price list already. So what might be different? I mean, maybe it's that they're already doing it, but so if they already have a product price list within a retainer, have they already achieved what you would set out for them to achieve, Caroline, or is there still more work to do?
Yes, the test for me is, are you monetizing revenue per head between 150 and 250? And is your net margin, your EBITDA, up around the 45%? So if your
the answer is no.
Well, then no, you're not productizing. We could do a whole session on productization. Productization is not changing pricing, and it's not just repackaging. It's so much more than that. So all of our clients that we work with have done some productization, and some of them have said we've been doing that, for 2 years. The absolute litmus test is evidence-based, and I always say, show me the revenue per head. So for the business that just asked that question, I would say, look at your revenue per head across every single person in the business. And if it's between 150 and 250 and you've got the EBITDA to show for it, then you have successfully, achieved and moved to a more productized business model. But if you're around the 100K mark with EBITDA between sort of 9 to 18, probably Esther is.
Or if you're lucky, well, between 9 and 15.
But anything sub 20% EBITDA is not a productized model. It just isn't. It's a service model with a bit of productization. So I know that sounds harsh, but that is the absolute evidenced reality of what we're talking about.
And not many agencies sit above 20%. I mean, probably only 20% of agencies sit above 20%, I would say. I don't know the exact figures, but it's not a very high percentage at all.
So exactly. So that's that's the difference in terms of what we're talking about here. We're talking about moving to a completely different system, language, and game. And for us, we would not be doing our job properly if our clients weren't able to evidence and report significantly higher EBITDA, valuations, shareholder value, enterprise value. And it all comes from the revenue per head, not squeezing overheads or cheaper talent. That's the one thing that we're obsessive about, is we are transforming revenue per head, and in most cases doubling it or trebling it from the starting position. And that is what gives you the EBITDA.
Interesting one here for you, Tess. Did you launch this with any sort of internal training around how to talk about products rather than time and services to your clients?
Yeah. I mean, it took us as partners lots of sessions with Caroline to get what we were talking about. And I think it's quite difficult from an internal perspective. You're talking about increasing profit, really. But from an external perspective, you're just talking about creating really valuable things that are utterly original and can't be compared to other things. You know, that's what it is. It's just having a point of difference for each of these different products. So being able to really believe in the efficacy and originality of the products and selling them across the business, it's probably the biggest, most important thing. So, you know, we had to, so the best way of doing that, as per usual, is to get everybody in the business building them with you. So we started building a few with, actually, no, I think we quite quickly, with the first one that really went well, and we were like, oh my God, Caroline wasn't bullshitting, this is possible, it's incredible. We did that collaboratively. We did it with a sort of cross section of the team, so that they all were evangelists for this product and then could sell it in. So yes is the answer. Everybody needs to believe and understand why they're different, because I mean, all it is talking point of difference a lot. And then believing it, you know, because, you know, it's not making it up. I mean, the really tricky thing about this whole thing is, yes, you need all this robustness that Caroline's talking about, but you actually also need some stuff out there that is genuinely different.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Yeah, it's got to be authentic, hasn't it? Otherwise,
it's got to be authentic, and everything you do has to be authentic, both internally to your own audience and externally to clients and new clients. So authenticity is absolutely key. You've got to be an authentic, changed business at the end of it, under any, you know, under any scrutiny. And that's your language, your narrative, your storytelling, your operating system, your talent model, your commercial models, your pricing model, your front doors, your client engagement model. You know, there's a lot of different aspects that need to be addressed and moved to that, to align, to support that change in business model. But it all starts with belief, you know, commerciality, creativity, and you know, a confidence in your differentiation and the value that you can deliver. And it's truly liberating when you are set up on a different business model in terms of your ability to not just make money, but your approach to innovation and creativity. It's completely different how it how sort of some of the inhibitors are removed.
I've got time to squeeze one last question in. It's a bit of a tricky question, actually. So if either of you want to pass on it and not give your trade secrets away, I will understand. Can either Tess or Caroline give a tangible example of the change for, say, a hypothetical client project of a rebrand project for a 100k budget? How does it look to clients before Caroline's been in and after Caroline's been in?
Tess, why don't you answer that? I mean, I'll answer it after you if you want.
I think there's a chronology that we plod along, a sort of preconceived idea of what the process is, and you have to quite quickly turn that upside down in order for it to be plausible that you're talking about something different. So if you go in and you say, okay, here's your typical project timeline, this followed by this, followed by this, followed by this, but we're going to charge you 250 for it instead of your 100. That's operating in the same way. So what I was actually going to say, in a way, quite answers, just in the last discussion, how you speak, how you address it, all of that has to change as well. So the language that you use. So if you enter into a typical project discussion, it's already not going to work. You have to enter it with a completely different perspective. So probably it has to start really early on. So it can be disrupting the pitch process, or can be disrupting any process. I mean, it's a disruptive process. It has to be, otherwise you're not original. So I think it's really just a question of all of us who are used to thinking about products for other people in various different ways, applying all of that originality to ourselves and just saying, okay, and that sounds so obvious, but unfortunately we don't tend to do that. So you need to disrupt the whole process. You can't just charge more or say something different. It's not repackaging in any form. It's just like, okay, let's turn this upside down. That's interesting that you want to do that project for 100 grand. Here are some really good agencies who will help you with it, but if you want us, this is how we'll do it. We'd like to spend the 100 grand on this, and then later on you can give us 450 for the rest of the process.
Yeah,
exactly.
Super
Lucky.
Well, I think we have officially run out of time. We're dead on 4 o'clock. So thank you everybody who came along today. Thank you so much, Caroline and Tess, for coming along and sharing your thoughts. And that was a bit of a tricky question, that last one, delving into your secrets. But thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Do look out for the next webinar that we'll be having on profitable pricing. You will be sent a recording of the webinar if you want to share that with anyone else in your agency. And cheerio, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.